I'm Anil Kumar, and in this video I'll summarize few concepts about absolute function. Absolute function is something which is written as f of x equals to absolute value of x, right? These two bars on the side is a representation of absolute function. Now, what do we mean by it? Absolute x means it always returns you a positive value. So if I say what is absolute value of 7, it is 7. What is absolute value of minus 3? It is always positive value, so it is 3. And say what is absolute value of minus 2 minus 3? So that is minus 2 minus 3 is minus 5, so that returns us 5. But if I write like this, absolute value of minus 4, then absolute of minus 4 is plus, but this minus makes it negative. So it could be negative also at times if I write like that, correct? So that is how our absolute function is. So what we observe here is that the absolute value is exactly same if x is positive rather non-negative, but if x is negative, then it becomes negative of that. Now this situation can be represented with the help of a graph. So here is this graph of absolute function. Let us consider a straight line y equals to x. So this is the line y equals to x for us, and we will try to understand what absolute value is. So if I take up a value, let us say 1, then absolute value of 1 is 1, right? So it's the same point. If I take 2, I get 2, so it's the same point. So for 2 as the y values, for absolute value, whenever we have non-negative numbers, then the absolute value is same as y equals to x. However, if I have a value of minus 1, then absolute value of minus 1 is not minus 1, but it's plus 1. So you get a point here. And for minus 2, it will be plus 2. So what really happens is that for any value of x which is less than 0, absolute value is negative of that, right? So we get a graph which is kind of like this. So this graph in red represents absolute function. Do you see that? So that is the absolute function which we are talking about. And now let me define it in terms of a piecewise function. So we can say this absolute function can be written as combination of two pieces. So we say absolute value of x is equals to x if x is greater than or equal to 0. However, it is equals to minus x if x is less than 0, right? That is what you see. So that becomes absolute value of function. So y equals to absolute x means the one which is shown in the red line, right? So that becomes a combination of two pieces. So it is x, the right piece, when x is greater than or equal to 0, and minus x, the left piece, when x is less than 0. So that is how you should be looking at absolute function. Now, in absolute functions, we also learned about solving equations and solving inequalities. So let me now discuss how to solve equations in absolute function. So to solve an equation like if I have absolute value of x is equals to 5, then what is the value of x? Now in this case, x could be equal to plus or minus 5, since both will return us 5 as the answer, right? So that is kind of important. If I have a question that x minus 1 is equal to 0, in that case, what is the value of x? So in this case, if you solve it, absolute value of 0 is 0, and therefore the only solution you have is x equals to 1, correct? So whenever you're working with equations involved with absolute functions, you could get 1, 0. Sometimes no solution. How? If I say absolute value of x minus 3 is equals to minus 4. Now this particular statement, absolute value is always positive, non-negative. So this one has no solution. Do you see that? So at times we may have no solution. So we have considered three different equations, right? And their solutions in this set of questions. Now let's look into inequalities and see how to solve inequalities for absolute functions. So if I have absolute value of x is less than 3, it means what? It really means that we're talking about on a number line something which is in between 3, right? Plus and minus 3, right? So that is what we're talking about on a number line, right? So we say, well, the solution is that x is greater than minus 3 and x is less than plus 3, right? So these two values are minus 3 and plus 3. So that is how you can solve inequality. You get the idea, right? At times we have questions where we say, well, we are given a solution here, and the solution is that the inequality solution represented on the line is something like this. That is to say, everything which is beyond these points. That means, let's say this point is minus 5, this point is 5. How to represent this as an absolute inequality? Well, in that case we can say absolute x is greater than 5. So we are going beyond 5, correct? So that represents the solution, correct? You could also have an inequality where the solution could be, let us say, just 1 point. That is, the solution is what value of absolute function will give us 5 as the answer. Just 1 point. Now this at times is a very, very tricky question, right? So since we need only 1 point, we are looking for the vertex. So we could say absolute value of x, and since we want 5, we have to put this vertex at 5, so I move it 5 units to the right, correct? And I could say, since I need only this solution, I can say less than equal to 0. So at least it is 0 at 5, correct? That is a thinking question. So I would like you to really think about this solution and work on this. This is tips, right? So this is not an easy job to understand, but this is an excellent question on absolute functions. If I'm trying to say write this as an inequality with absolute function, then that is how they are connected, right? Another difficult question which you worked on was to represent a situation like this in terms of absolute function. So I'm saying that these are the 2 points. However, I'm not writing plus and minus same value. If I write a value here, let us say minus 5 and plus 3 here, how to represent this as an inequality? Think about it. Pause the video, write the answer, and think about it. Well, the solution was find the midpoint. So first step is find midpoint, okay? So midpoint here is minus 5 plus 3 divided by 2, which is minus 2 divided by 2, or minus 1. So once you say minus 1 is my midpoint, then you have to see how far are you from the midpoint? How far are you from the midpoint? So you are 4 units away. Do you see that? 4 units away. So you have to be within 4 units. And for that, you get your equation. So you have to move to minus 1. That means absolute value of x plus 1. And you have to be within 4 units. So less than 4. So this equation and inequality, this inequality represents the solution given to you. You get the idea. Last but not the least, you may have a situation where you need a solution which is all real numbers. Now, what absolute function can represent that? Okay, as we said earlier, we could say inequality for us is that absolute function is, you could write greater than equal to 0. So say greater than equal to 0, that means for all real numbers it is true. So that is the solution for the whole number line as part of your solution. Now in this particular video, in short, we summarized how to evaluate absolute function, how to sketch one, right? How to define as a piecewise function, correct? And how to write the equations or solve equations. Let me write solve equations, and also inequalities. with reference to number line. So we used number line and inequality combination, right? This was a piecewise function. Correct. So in this particular video, we have considered almost all aspects of absolute function which you need to know to move forward. I hope that helps. Thank you and all the best.